grandchild on my mum's side and not far off from my dad's side, which means I grew up surrounded by family. My childhood was spent with time spent with cousins at my grandparents, and as the oldest, I'm pretty much babysat them all. I'm also a hopeless romantic and a sucker for a baby cuddle, so it's probably no surprise, really, that my dream as a teenager was to marry young and have lots of kids. But despite growing up surrounded by a large, noisy family, I was a very insecure teenager that lacked confidence and preferred to stay home reading books. The staying home reading books part hasn't changed much, but hopefully the rest does. I'm still dreaming of that library with a rolling ladder to reach the top shelves. When I was 17, some friends from school invited me along to their youth group, which was held at a church. I'm not sure really why I agreed to go along, as I didn't like going out, but I went anyway. I wasn't an easy teenager to win around. My youth leaders at the time, now my friends, spent the best part of about 6 weeks trying to get me to talk. But I'm grateful they persisted. I wouldn't be here now if they hadn't. As this youth group was in a church, they shared about Jesus, and it was like hearing about a puzzle piece I didn't know was missing. It wasn't long after that I started going along to Sunday services too. Finding Jesus, the church, and the youth group also helped me to find my confidence a little. I joined the kids' ministry team, probably no surprise there. Any excuse for a baby cuddle, remember? And got involved in the life of the church. But it wasn't all plain sailing. Between the ages of 17 and 19, I made a few mistakes, did some things I wasn't proud of, and struggled through a friendship breakdown. Despite all that, I continued going along to church, serving, and those youth leaders kept being the positive influence I needed in my life. At 18, I was invited along to my first leadership conference, which was called Confluence. I think it sounds like an illness now, but it was all right at the time. At the time, I didn't feel like a leader, didn't believe I had the confidence to be a leader, and I didn't see it as something I wanted, but I went along anyway. I see a reoccurring theme there. This conference ended up being a pivotal moment in my life. It was the first time I heard a word directly from God and had things spoken over me that have carried me through the last 17 years. The word God spoke over me at that conference was from Genesis 22:17, which says, "I will surely bless you and make your descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky and the sand on the seashore." But more on that later. As I said, that conference was a pivotal moment in my life. And at 19, I started praying into what I wanted to ask God for. Now, I'm not someone who journals unless it's in my Bible, and I don't keep diaries. But at this particular time, I'd been asked by my youth leader to keep one for a couple of weeks, and recently I found that journal. At the time of writing these notes, I was coming to the end of an apprenticeship and considering what I would do next. Now, in this journal, I had written that I wanted to go into full-time ministry as a children's pastor, and I wanted to be a mum. But I'd written my next season is going to be another season of preparation, a chance to learn and grow in God more, to build that passion that God has put in me and realize and know the steps I need to take to fulfill my dreams. I just didn't know at the time how long that season of preparation would be or where it would take me. Reading that journal recently surprised me because I think I've always struggled with my confidence on some level, and I've never really saw myself as a leader. So to write that I wanted to be a children's pastor at 19 must have been a God thing and not a me thing. Not long after that apprenticeship finished, I ended up going to work for a company that I then worked for nearly 11 years. And over those 11 years, I grew up. I discovered what I was good at, discovered how passionate I was about God, church, children's ministry, and organising things. And those that work in the office with me know that if it doesn't fit into a box and doesn't have a label, it doesn't count. But I also struggled, especially when my dream of getting married and having children didn't happen. I had friends around me that got married and started their families, and yet I was the single Pringle who would pray and ask God time and time again, year after year, for it to be my year to find someone and start that chapter of my life. In time, I came to realize that God had bigger and better plans, and my singleness wasn't a struggle. God would bless me in other ways. I just had to trust him. My experiences of singleness are a whole other story, and maybe I'll share that one day. But for now, I just wanted to say that those years taught me how to lean on God more than I ever thought I could, and how he can take what feels like a no and turn it into a season of purpose. Looking back, I can see that while I was waiting for my someone or someday, he was already writing the most important parts of my story. Now, during those years, I held different roles in the church and in my job and learned so many things about myself and who God had created me to be. But in the back of my mind, I always wanted full-time ministry to be where I ended up. So I continued praying into that, and God kept reminding me that it wasn't time yet. In 2019, I left the church I became a Christian in and moved to Life Church. It felt like starting all over again, but it felt like home. In 2022, Gareth and Marianne joined the church, and the opportunity came up to step into a role working for church as children's coordinator and operations administrator. And God finally said yes. Thankfully, so did Gareth and Phil when they interviewed me, or that would have been awkward. I've served in children's ministry for as long as I've been a Christian. Children bring me immense amounts of joy. They bring energy, unique questions, and thoughts that make ministry so rewarding. They love deeply, trust freely, and have a way of seeing God with a simple and pure faith. So overseeing the children's ministry at Life Church was a no-brainer. However, as part of my role within the church, I also supported our Friday youth programme. Then in January 2024, Gareth and the SLT asked me to oversee Youth 2 as we expanded what we did and grew the team. Youth ministry is something I've always served in and supported in, either because friends were leading it or because it was part of my job description. But I never felt called to youth ministry. They scared me a little. I wrestled with God a lot in this decision because I didn't feel equipped for it, but he had other plans and had been equipping me for many years. I just didn't realise it. Saying yes to overseeing youth has been the very best decision I've ever made. These guys have inspired, encouraged, and challenged me in the very best way over the last 18 months. They've helped me to discover new things I'm passionate about, and their questions and opinions have helped me grow, and I wouldn't change that for the world. In February of this year, I became full-time in my role, and my job title changed to children's and youth pastor. So 16 years on from writing those prayers down in my journal as a 19-year-old, I'm now living them out. Just maybe not how I thought. Now, there are some things over the course of those 16 years that God has continually reminded me of, but I wanted to briefly share 3 of those things with you with the aim of hopefully encouraging all of you too. So the first one is that it's all in God's timing. Trusting in God's timing has been the hardest part of the last 16 years, because for some things, or maybe a lot, I'm not very patient, but God doesn't work on our timescales. He knows what is right for us and when we need it. Had God given me a full-time ministry position at 19 and said, off you go, I would have failed miserably, because I needed those years of preparation to grow some skills, learn some things, and become completely reliant on God to be able to do what I do. Had I have not spent 11 years working in administration and customer support, I would not have the skills I use today to support the operations of the church. Had I have not spent all those years serving in children's ministry and youth and supporting youth ministry, I would not have the skills I have today to serve where I serve. But most importantly, had God not made me wait all those years, I wouldn't be where I am in my faith, in my relationship with him, and definitely wouldn't be reliant on him for all that I need. And that is the most important part, is putting God first. Waiting isn't easy. It takes patience, strength, and trust that God's plan is bigger and better than yours. Have I arrived at a place where all my prayers are answered? Definitely not. But now I know that I can trust in God's timing for my life because he hasn't failed me yet. And I don't know what you're praying for right now. Maybe like me, you're waiting for an answer to prayer, or you've been asking God for something for years and it's not happened yet. Ecclesiastes 3 verse 1 says there's a time for everything and a season for every activity under the heavens. I promise you that God has not forgotten you. He's heard every prayer. He knows you're waiting, but he's also waiting for the right time because his timing is perfect. And when that moment comes, when God finally opens the door you've been praying for, you'll look back and see that the waiting wasn't wasted. Every challenge, every delay, every not yet was God's way of shaping you for the very thing you were asking him for. So don't give up in the waiting. Keep trusting, keep serving, keep growing, because when his perfect timing arrives, you'll be ready. Not just to receive what you're asking for, but to receive it well. The second thing I've learned over the years is that God is faithful, and Tim may have stolen some of what I was going to say earlier, but that must be a God thing. But that God is faithful, and that doesn't just mean that he comes through on those big promises. It means that he is steady, constant, and present no matter what season I'm in. There have been so many times I've struggled, made poor choices, or reacted in ways that didn't honor him. But despite my failures, in the highs and lows, he's always been there, guiding and encouraging and shaping me. Deuteronomy 31:8 says, "The Lord goes before you and will be with you. He will never leave you nor forsake you. Do not be afraid, do not be discouraged." Now that's not a nice verse for someone else. I've seen it lived out in my own life. He shows up daily in little ways. An encouragement from a friend right when I need it. A conversation with a child or a young person, a moment that makes me smile on a hard day, or a song that speaks straight to my heart, or just that gentle nudge reminding me of his presence. Over time, those little daily ways have built my trust in him for the bigger things, the answered prayers, the big conversations, leadership decisions, and beautiful relationships. When you've seen his faithfulness in the small, you can trust him without hesitation in the big. Is this something that you need reminding of today? That God hasn't walked away from you? That he sees you right where you are? And that his faithfulness is just as real in the middle of the struggle as it is on the mountaintop? What are the little ways he's been showing up for you lately? What moments can you look back on and see his hand at work? Because the same God who's been faithful before is faithful always. Sometimes we just need to look for it. Sorry. And then I think the biggest thing that God has reminded me of over the years is that his promises never fail. They may look a little different to how I prayed for them or how I expected them to look, but they never fail. I mentioned right at the beginning that God had spoken the words of Genesis 22:17. I will surely bless you and make your descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky and the sand on the seashore, over me at 18 years old. Now, to some people, maybe having heard my story today, you'd have thought this promise, the words he's spoken over me, hadn't yet come true, that it wasn't a prayer that he'd answered yet. But I know differently. When God spoke those words over me, my initial thought was that they were the promise of a big family of my own, children that I would have that would be numerous. But God's promises don't always look like we imagine them. And this is something I've come to realize as I've reflected on this part of my story recently. God has answered that prayer. I will have descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky and the sand on the seashore. They just aren't my biological children right now. I don't know if that will happen in the future, but I'm leaving that in God's hands. Instead, God has answered this prayer and this promise in the way of those amazing kids out there in their groups and these incredible young people sitting in front of me. Whether I get to lead, disciple, teach, and encourage them for 3 years or for the next 25, I'll love them like my own. I'll champion them, pray for them, and support their families because that's the call that God has placed on my life. This is a promise I'll never take for granted, that I'll thank God for every day, because it's an honor and a privilege to be a small part of their lives. This generation sat in front of me, and the one out there are living, breathing fulfillment of God's faithfulness. They are my stars, and they are my sand. They are the gift that I didn't expect, but God always knew. His promises never fail. They just sometimes come wrapped in mystery and an unexpected timing. And honestly, I think that's the beauty of a relationship with God. He doesn't always give us what we asked for in the exact way we pictured it, but he always gives us what we need and what will bring him the greatest glory through our lives. Some of you are sitting here right now wondering if your prayers are being heard, if the promise God gave you years ago has expired. Maybe you're clinging on to a word, a dream, a hope, and you're thinking, God, where are you in this? Let me tell you, he is not late, he is not silent, and he is not forgotten. I stand here not with a perfect story, but with a faithful testimony. A testimony that when God speaks a word over your life, you can trust him. You may have to walk through a few things. You may have to surrender your version of the promise. You may have to wrestle with disappointment and impatience, but you will also witness his faithfulness and his goodness. And let me encourage you with this. God's promises are bigger than us. Sometimes we think it's just about our lives, our families, our dreams. But when God speaks, he speaks with generations in mind. He speaks legacy. He sees impact far beyond what we can comprehend. So keep holding on, keep trusting, keep walking, even when it doesn't look like what you expected. Especially then, because that's often where God does his most beautiful redemptive work. And to those of you that are part of my promise, my kids and my young people, thank you. Thank you for letting me lead you, encourage you, and be a part of your story. I pray that one day you too will look back and say, I trusted in God's timing. He was faithful, and his promises never fail. My prayer is that I can steward this gift of leadership well so that you can go further than I ever will. So to finish, I think the band can come back up now. If there's anything I've learned over the last 16 years, it's that nothing is wasted in God's hands. The waiting seasons, the wandering seasons, the confusing or the joyful ones, they've all been part of a bigger story. This same is true for you. Your life is not random. Your prayers have not gone unheard. Your dreams are not forgotten. God's timing is perfect. His faithfulness is constant, and his promises never fail. So whatever season you're in, the waiting, the trusting, the wrestling, know this: God is still writing your story, and when he writes, it's always good. God, I thank you for the opportunity to share the story that you have woven into my life today. I thank you for your goodness, your faithfulness, and your timing in everything. Thank you that you have always been there, directing, speaking, encouraging through every season of my life so far. Thank you that you waste nothing, that every moment is a part of the story you are writing. I pray this morning that you would speak to us. You would help us to trust in your timing when it feels slow, to hold on to your faithfulness when it feels hard, and to believe in your promises when they feel far away. For every person here who is waiting for an answer, remind them today that you see them, you hear them, and you are working for their good. Strengthen us to keep walking with you, to keep our eyes on you, and to keep saying yes to the plans you have for us. I give you all the glory and honor for every part of my story so far and the one that you're still writing. Amen.